You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
Check 1, 2, check. Hello, and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. Over the decades, the long undead corpse of goth has certainly bloated and desiccated. Clubs are born and laid to rest. Festivals bloom like algae on a moonlit pond or shrivel and vanish, leaving little trace behind. But somehow, the creatures that crawl in the night can still be found lurking in the deep, dark shadows of the city. You can hear the thud of their platform boots on the empty, dead sidewalks at 4 a.m. You can find them on fog-drenched dance floors, a menagerie of lace and velvet, sweat-soaked PVC, and angrily frayed fishnet. It's well known we aren't afraid of decay. In fact, at any given moment, somewhere in the world, a goth is hugging a tombstone, reciting bad poetry by candlelight. But, unless you've only recently emerged from a crypt, you know that the black cauldron of goth is far from decayed, and in fact bubbling over. All across our black planet, the goth scene is thriving, bolstered by an effervescent new generation of sentient, melodramatic satin, or goths for short. And Chicago is not immune. In fact, while I'm certainly biased, Chicago certainly feels like the epicenter of the next wave. If Gothic Beauty was still running their annual list of top 25 cities to be goth in, Chicago would absolutely be in that #1 spot. Beyond a specific location, however, the literal blood, sweat, and tears that is shed at concerts and club nights is what we're here to talk about today. The music of goth, the canon of goth, the trademarked dramaticism of goth, the dry-witted snark of absinthe-sipping elitists, the humor of very seriously not taking yourself seriously, and the uniform of eternal darkness were bore upon the shoulders of community. The nightlife and occasional day life, though always under the shade of an impenetrable black umbrella, is the beating heart of goth. Actually, I think Nick Razor put it well in his new book, Black Planet, A History of Goth and Death Rock, when he said, "The music and fashion of the goth subculture required sacred spaces in which to flourish, environments where the dark aesthetic could be performed, refined, and shared among like-minded souls. It was in the nightclubs, church halls, and underground venues that the goth identity truly came to life. These spaces functioned as laboratories for subcultural development, shelters from mainstream society, and crucibles where the abstract concepts of the music were translated into lived experience." Our guests this episode are Nat and Chelsea, Chicago Goths who run the Instagram page Chicago Gothic Scene, along with the eponymous website. I've invited them here tonight to talk about the growth of new events that are run by young promoters, the critical importance of cultivating community, the best ways to keep our spaces safe, and other such subjects concerned with the burgeoning goth scene. As always, I am your host, Danny Ashes, and I'm here with my co-host, Trey. I'd love to start by asking both of you what your introduction to goth was. How did you discover the subculture?
I feel like for me, it kind of was always there. I grew up with two parents who were really into music, and my dad especially was really into rock, ska, post-punk. So even though I didn't have like a name for it at the time, but it was there. And I think just being on the internet a lot growing up kind of helped me name those things. Like I know one of the first, I guess, alternative like scenes I got really into was Riot Girl. And then from
Nice.
there I got into punk. And then once I stopped being super angry, I got more into goth because like I feel like this is so common for a lot of people, but like you kind of grow out of that anger, but you still kind of have like some angst to you.
Mm-hmm.
But the way goth approaches it feels a lot more mature. And yeah, from there I've really enjoyed it. I feel like I feel like punk and I also had a hardcore phase. Hardcore and like those scenes can be very rigid sometimes. There's a lot of rules to it. So I
Right.
really like the fluidity of the goth scene. I felt like you could really, really genuinely be weird and different. So
I agree. I think that's a really good point too, because people do argue online a lot about how many rules there are to goth, or if there should be any, or if it's too fluid or it's not strict enough. But yeah, too, especially something like the hardcore scene, I think is very, very niche to the point where it's like really constricting. So I think people kind of take the openness of goth for granted sometimes.
yeah, that is very interesting and a good point. Like I see all the time online people saying like, "Oh, you don't dress like this, you're not goth. You don't listen to this, you're not goth." But when you're like physically in the scene, it does not feel like that at
Yeah,
all.
Yeah, we
yeah,
don't give a shit as far as that's concerned. All that sort of gatekeepy stuff is, I mean, it exists in real world, but it's nowhere near like it is in the virtual world.
Yeah, yeah, it seems like a huge problem there. But yeah, I think just that like acceptance of like the weird stuff made it really stick for me.
mm.
Hmm.
And Chelsea, what about you?
I guess, well, it's not similar to Nat, right? Because she obviously grew up with parents who listened to like post punk and ska and all that growing up, right? I grew up in, I guess, a traditional Mexican household
Mm-hmm.
where it was more like corridos and shit like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my uncle, he got me into like rock at a very young age. I don't like him now, but I do remember one of the first songs I remember hearing was an Elvis Presley song, right? I believe it's my earliest memory. I think it was like 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And it was just a segue for, getting into rock music and eventually branching out on my own and getting very into punk, which I still am, right? I love punk, right?
Me too.
And then, knowing the basics of like goth bands, right? You're starting off, you start to know like the Cure, Susie and the Banshees, like the more mainstream bands, right? And then you just dive deeper and you just kind of realize like, hey, I kind of just want to be here. I like this sound,
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I got into it.
Hell yeah. Yeah, my parents were not also were not that cool. But here we all are nevertheless. So you guys run an Instagram page and a website and your and the Discord, Chicago Goth Discord as well. When did you decide to or become interested in sort of promoting the local scene and events that are going on?
I remember me and Nat, one of the first events that we had gone to was actually in Nocturna, right? As is for most people here in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And we kind of wanted to start to go out into the local scene as well, because we were going to, hardcore shows and like punk shows, and those were easy to find, right? Like people had dedicated pages to it, right? But for us trying to get into goth, it was kind of hard trying to find which bands were in the scene, right? And one of the first shows I believe we saw was Iron Years with Grave Love at Grave Love's first show. I think that was back in like 2024, right now.
Oh wow, okay.
It was not mistaken. Yeah, it was at I think it was at Livewire. And we I think after that, I kind of just like, how come no one has a page dedicated to like local goth shows, right? And I was thinking, well, fuck it. How come we can't do it, And then I asked Nat if she wanted to join, and she was like, yeah. So it kind of just started up from there.
Yeah, I think another big thing is we would see so many pages that would do that, but with hardcore bands or like, yeah, mainly just hardcore bands, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just made sense. I think there was at the time like this huge shift happening in the goth scene from my understanding, for a long time, it was mainly older people. And then there was like this sudden shift where a lot of like younger people who were maybe more active on places like Instagram or TikTok were getting interested in the scene, but didn't really know how to find it. I remember when I first started, like I would only find things on Facebook, but I
That's
don't
where the
know.
old people are.
Yeah.
That's just where I am.
Yeah.
I don't know who in our, well, there are still some people in our generation, at least around where we live. It's like huge around on our side of the South Side for some reason. But yeah, I think that was like a big portion of it too. It's just like, you know, like Chelsea said, just trying to find a way to streamline it so people could like have one source to find things.
Right. Yeah, I have seen, well, actually, Trey, you could speak to this as well. I think pre-pandemic, I did see younger people out at the clubs, but they were certainly the minority. And then I think I noticed after everything started opening up, and they were allowing people to go out to concerts and things, there was a huge explosion of younger people. And I think that's only accelerated over the last 6 years, to the point now where I actually want to talk about this later, the way the scene is changing. But yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. I don't know what you've noticed, Trey, over the years.
It's hard to say. I mean, I definitely see more young people than used to be out, but it's really, I see more of all people because the scene just exploded after everything started opening back up. And, you know, it used to be you go out to Nocturna and it would be crazy busy on Halloween, crazy busy on Valentine's Day, but the other nights were a little bit more mixed. It was never at capacity, where I don't think we've not been at capacity on any Nocturna for the last year and a half. It's just been wall to wall people there every Nocturna, not just those big popular ones, which is a mixed blessing to me. I love it for the scene. I love to see the life, but I miss having so much space on the dance floor.
Oh my God. Yeah. I miss it too. Every time I go now, I'm like, dude, I can't even move.
Yeah, I mean, I always knew I needed to do this, but I try to do it more now, getting there right as the doors open. And I usually stay till they're turning the lights on. And the beginning and the end is when I get my dance in.
I think that's... No, go ahead.
on. Oh, I was just going to say golf time. I feel like people always show up like way later.
They do. There's usually a little bit of a line right at the beginning, but people do show up. Usually the first hour, the floor is pretty clear.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably what the other, because obviously Nocturna is the sort of tent pole event.
Yeah,
but that's really opened up more space for other concerts and club nights and things that are not going to be as well attended, and that's probably where the better option for having a more open dance floor is at this point.
Maybe, but most events I go to are still pretty packed. Not that I go to all of them, but there's a lot of crowd out there, which is great. I love the fact that the scene has exploded so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a show recently that hit capacity, and it was a Def Rock show. It was like nothing but
yeah.
Which is crazy because it's like I feel like Def Rock, even within the goth scene, is kind of niche. So it's just really cool.
It is.
It was. That was a good show, though.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. You were there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah, it was so packed. I couldn't find anyone that night.
No, it was hard to find people.
Yeah.
I just saw today that Sarah is starting a new Death Rock monthly night.
Yeah, Neutral.
Which is because I remember when she did the first Back to the Grave. I don't remember how many years ago that was. But that was sort of a every 3 months kind of thing. So the fact that there's so much demand that we can do these niche nights now, and have people show up is amazing. Because it hasn't been like that for a long time. I remember maybe 15 years ago, 15 years ago, people were complaining about saying that the scene was basically dead and it wasn't coming back.
That happens every 10 to 15
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
That
I
honestly
think the
makes me
difference
so
now.
happy. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, no, it's fine. I was just gonna say, I think the difference now is that a lot of what is considered goth nowadays kind of sounds the same, if I'm being quite honest, right? Like a lot of the post-punk sounds, or dark wave and all. And I love it. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like a lot of them try to copy each other, and more people want that rock sound back in goth. You know, that we have a couple of death rock bands now in Chicago, and now we have more death rock nights, right? Which I absolutely love, and I'm happy to see, because it's like, you know, people want something different, right? They don't completely want the same thing that, let's say, that LA or New York or another scene is doing, you know?
Yeah,
sure.
To your point, like I was just talking to my friend Ryan, who's in the band Witch Hands. They were just on tour, and he was talking to me about how he thinks there is more of a demand now for guitar-based music. And it's exciting to me because I've sort of been waiting for that. Don't know how many years ago now that the sort of like Drab Majesty and that sort of developed into this dark wave scene that exploded. And I think we are past the point where there's sort of like a fatigue of just that sort of two people and a synthesizer style of music, which I also still love. But I love goth rock, I love death rock, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's really nice to see now that finally we're kind of coming back around. To your point, Trey, there is always a cycle. Like, I'm sure we'll get back to cyberpunk at some point, or cyber goth at some point, and the industrial stuff is going to come back. But for me, this is especially exciting to see a demand for guitar-based goth music. I wonder if there's something there from that sort of like the popularity of the trad goth sort of aesthetic, if that's kind of circled back around on that.
I think it has to do more with, like, you know, how punk and hardcore is like very big now, right? Because, you know, a lot of I guess subcultures go into each other a lot of the times, right? And some people are in both, right? So I would assume that, like, with that heavy stuff, it's kind of going into the goth scene a bit too, because that's what people want to hear. They want to hear, like, just rock, you know?
Yeah. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that like goth rock and death rock have historically also been more political, and considering the state of things right now, that maybe people want more like angry political music?
Yeah, I think so, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. I kind of was just looking at it as like from the perspective of like the dark wave and quote unquote post-punk fatigue.
Kind of burning out.
Yeah.
There's also there's been a lot of overproduction in music, things being really clean and pristine, and the rise of AI and all that. People are looking for something more raw, less likely to be produced by a computer. They want real life people being all sweaty and loud in a, you know, a dark and dirty little club space.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like that's also like literally what being goth is too. It's like I don't know if transgressive is the right word, but it's supposed to be transgressive. And I guess in like a time like this, what other goth genre would do that best besides like, you know, like death rock and goth rock?
Yeah, I definitely think historically, Trey, I know you have a fraught relationship with the word transgressive, but historically I do think goth has pushed the boundaries, sort of like said, we're not satisfied with the status quo. We want to create a environment where things can be done differently, and just by the very nature of being different or alternative, that creates a friction with other ways, other systems of and expectations of how you're supposed to behave and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to look. And I know there was a few years ago, there's a club called Wraith, I think, in England, and they had an article where they were talking about how they were trying to bring back this sort of transgression, the pushing the boundaries thing, because they felt like the sort of mainstreaming of goth, or the popularity of goth in the mainstream, was kind of watering down the shock value, and so they were trying to push that.
To be fair, I have no problem with transgression in and of itself. It's only when you are specifically doing something that may not be true to yourself just to be transgressive that I have a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
I like people who are just doing their own thing, damn the consequences. And that usually tends to be transgressive, but it doesn't have to be transgressive. But that person is not going to stop if, some group embraces it and like, no, you're just like us. You're like, that's fine. I'm being like me. And if I'm like you, cool. But if I'm not and I'm being transgressive, also cool. I don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of transgression I like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope. There's definitely some, like the underground scene. Whew.
Mm-hmm.
Some stuff that goes down there, and I'm like, come on, guys. It gets to a point.
Right. Yeah.
The point where it veers into edge lordery that I don't like.
Right. Well, because I mean, sexism could be transgressive in certain settings, right? So it's sort of like, what's the point you're trying to get at? What's the core value of it really? That's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, sure.
Well, so let me ask you both this then. So you're running this page, you're promoting these events, you're going out all the time. What is it about clubs and concerts that's so important? What is it, this idea of community and sort of being more or transcending just a bunch of sweaty people in a room together? Like, what is that? What is the importance of that to you? What has that provided for you in your life?
I can go.
Personally, I think...
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's because you took a pause, so I thought you were thinking.
Go. Go.
Okay, damn. Okay. I was gonna say, like, I feel like the biggest thing, and at least like in terms of like concerts and clubs, I think the music is the center point, or at least it should be the center point.
Mm-hmm.
I think music is such a universal language, and like even dancing is such a, like, so many cultures. There's so many cultures surrounded around dancing, because that is like a very communal thing to do. Dancing with people, singing with people, listening to music with people. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is like, I don't know, like it's just so sweet to be at like a bar and everyone's dancing and singing along. There's like a nice sense of unity and togetherness, which I think especially in a country as like, oh, I have such a hard time pronouncing this word. Individualistic. Ooh, I got it.
You did perfect.
Thank you. As America, that like feeling of community, and especially now, that feeling of community and collectivism is very much needed.
Yeah.
Your turn, Chelsea.
Sorry, my cat dropped something. I had to pick it up real quick.
What's your cat? Hang on, we have to pause now. What's your cat's name? How many cats do you have?
Well, right now I have 3 around me.
Hell yeah.
I have 2 black ones. One is called Mami. The other one's called Munye. And then the white one is called Bebe, right?
Okay.
And the white one just took my goddamn lamp before. So I had to go pick that up real quick.
Mischievous.
But yeah, I guess building off what Nat said, right? I think people, when they go to these events, they want to find like a sense of community, right? You want to be around people who have the same ideals as you, right? Mm-hmm. And who listen to the same music, right? While goth is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily mainstream, but it's much more known now than it was like a couple years ago, right? But you still know that when you go to these events that you have people who listen to the same music as you, so you can like basically understand one another,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think going to these events is just like, it's a very peaceful thing after like a hard week. You just want to listen to some music. You want to be around people who have the same ideals and morals as you, and you kind of just want to relax, And I think that's what a lot of people want, you know?
Yeah.
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 Get
I agree with
drunk.
both of you. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying and get drunk.
Yeah.
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 As the local straight edge goth, I don't really see that, but I get it.
Yeah. Escape. I think, like, yeah, I mean, we talk about the music a lot, but I think to both of your points, that the community and the in-person connection is, I think, the reason goth exists in the first place, because it's what the music was built on. Back in the 80s and especially the 90s, I think, for the most part, like, goth bands weren't getting substantial record deals or making a ton of money on tour or anything like that. Goth clubs weren't making a bunch of money. Even something like the Batcave had to close after like 4 years or something like that because of low attendance. And so I think that goth art and goth spaces and goth music has always been DIY, or as Ali likes to say, do it ourselves, not yourself. And I think that's because I think the point is the scene wouldn't exist if it wasn't for people doing hard work collectively, sacrificing sleep, working second jobs, losing money, donating time and skill, because it's not a scene that was given to us. We kind of made the infrastructure. We created the micromedia. We made our own record labels. We held house parties and festivals. Looking at the history of the music, bands were always like sharing members between themselves or helping each other get booked for shows, promoting each other's music, that kind of thing. A lot of if you read about the goth record labels over the years, a lot of it is people saying like, okay, we sold a record, we made like $500. We're going to take all of that money and put it right back into the next album or into promoting this other band. And so I think the history of goth is full of our like struggle and the connection of these meaningful relationships building on top of each other through going out to events, to create something bigger. Like maybe you run into somebody at a club or a concert and are inspired by somebody else, and then you form a band or you start a night or you decide like, I want to learn how to DJ. So I think that the whole scene sort of lives and dies on supporting each other, to sustain that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that like explanation really like in my brain, I'm like, damn, yeah, it's true. Like this is really a subculture. Like it's a culture. These are people's lives. Like their whole lives are built around this. And like a lot of what you were talking about like doing like a record or a show and then like keeping all that money so you could do like the next thing. It reminded me of so much of what me and Chelsea do. So it's kind of to know that like people that's always been a thing in the scene, that like a lot of us are still continuing that kind of attitude.
Yeah,
it's just really sweet.
I think you really have to love the scene in order to be doing all this, you know? Like, you just can't be like, oh, I want to be a part of a scene because it's cool. No, you actually have to put, like, you actually have to have love and care for it and put time and effort into it, you know, in order to see it grow the way you want it to grow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely can't be in it for the money.
Right.
Yeah, because there's no fucking money made.
For me, you know, when I think about it, I've met some of my best friends in life in the scene, like people who I've shared my darkest moments with, or have been sort of a helping hand, or I was able to help them, even sort of like mentorship. Because like, well, from the beginning, again, just historically, I know people would like come together and maybe someone's really good at art, so they might share those skills for like how to make flyers for events, or how to put a zine together. Or I know I've been to Nocturna. I have some friends who are vendors, and I've seen them hang out and chat with each other about like, well, how do you market this? How do you sell that? How did you make this? And sort of, instead of being like a competition thing, or people like helping each other with hair and makeup or fashion tips, like, I've experienced mentorship and like therapy from therapists that just ended up in the scene, sort of life skills and this kind of thing. There's that whole like intergenerational mentorship, which I think is underappreciated. But when you're a new goth, I think it's pretty easy to be taken under the wing of an older goth. Like I've heard people talk about their fairy goth mother or something like that. A lot of us, I think, well, just to speak for myself, I don't have a great relationship with my parents. So that connection of like a found family and learning, the codes and customs and skills within goth is a really meaningful experience.
Yeah, definitely. Like I know some people in the scene, like a lot of the younger people, they'll get together on the holidays. Like they'll spend Thanksgiving together, they'll
Yeah.
spend Christmas together.
Yeah.
They'll all help each other out with like flyers or like borrowing equipment. It's always really like yeah, it really is like a found family for a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah, I know we have a New Year's Eve tradition now with some people that I met in the goth scene, including Trey, which is really lovely to have. And I think it's, thinking of being young and coming into the scene, if that's how you get in. People get into it when they're older and that kind of thing. But I think that can be really formative because it's sort of that age where you've maybe waited for years to sort of experience what is this mysterious goth night thing. And it's this time in our lives where we're starting to explore freedom away from our parents and having fewer rules, sort of discovering our identities and learning what our passions and interests are and building a community outside of, if it's church or school or whatever. So there's a lot of like social emotional learning that's happening at an important stage that I think for a lot of people makes these club nights and spaces sort of feel sacred or feel like really meaningful in that way.
I know we're talking about events and it's really focused on club nights and bands and stuff like that and the music, which we all pretty much agree is pretty much key. But do you guys do as promoters or think about doing anything that, is maybe focused during daytime hours or time when people who maybe can't go out late at night for whatever reason, they're either too young or they're too old or have other obligations and, doing things like a cemetery tour or just gathering together at a cafe or something like that, that kind of event that's not necessarily focused around going out to a club in the evenings um, to do, dance or see a band.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what?
we
We have
have.
thought about that. Yeah, we've thought about that a lot because, like you said, there's people who can't go out at night. There's people who don't drink. There's also baby bats who, are under the age of 21 and they want to meet more people in the scene, but they can't because a lot of places are 21 and over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have thought about that. But what we've noticed recently that there's been people who have been hosting their own events. Sorry, my dog. The people who have been hosting
You got an
their own
animal
events as
kingdom
well.
there.
Yeah.
I have 3 cats and 2 dogs also, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. There was a meetup with some people who did I guess they went to the aquarium a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't go because I have work, unfortunately. And then I know in a couple of weeks, there's going to be like a clothing swap for Goth attire.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to see that other people are also, thinking of like, hey, we need to do more stuff like this for people who don't drink, for people who are under the age of 21, or just simply want to do more stuff during the daytime,
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. I've definitely been to not the aquarium, but I think it was the Museum of Science and Industry, maybe. There was a goth meetup a long time ago. I used to run for like 6 years. Every year I would do a goth day at the Renaissance Festival in Wisconsin because I think those outside of club events are so important. And for me, I also like to just sort of hang out with people in a different environment where maybe it's easier to chat or just have a different experience. So it's really lovely to see those happening.
We have been thinking of, doing more like a art, like art walks and stuff like that, right? We just have to plan it around. Me and Nat both work early in the mornings, right? I work at like a 8 to 5. I don't know what Nat's schedule usually is like, right? So we would usually have to, get some PTO to do stuff like that.
Yeah, we've also thought about like poetry and like fashion shows because I do think that stuff also plays a really important role in the scene. So, but yeah, it's hard.
Oh man, I would love to get
Yeah.
some poetry stuff going on.
Yeah, it would be so sick. Some gothic poetry, that'd be awesome.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
usually
very
the struggle.
90s. Go ahead.
I was going to say, usually the struggle with a lot of those other types of events, there's I guess, sort of a built-in concept of a revenue stream and stuff that happens around clubs or bands or things like that, because it's a thing designed around gathering people in. They've got covers taken care of. They've got drinks available. There's this whole industry that's there to gather people in, make a modest amount of income so you can continue doing those events and giving people stuff to do. Whereas these more make your own, do your own kind of things, whether it's, everyone going up to the Renaissance Fair or organizing a cemetery walk or organizing a trip to the museum, those places, I mean, a lot of times you have to hope you have enough interest to get enough people together, or you just sort of waste a lot of time and money trying, especially for things that you have to like organize a guide or like a special event where it's not just going to a public place. If you don't have enough people buying in and you just show up and all of a sudden you've got this expensive guide that you were hoping to split between 20, 30 people and you have 5, all of a sudden you run into some problems. So there's a lot of logistical issues with some of those ad hoc daytime events, especially if you really try to do it up and make something special. But I think it's worthwhile, but it's hard to get people to go sometimes.
Do you guys feel like maybe that's partly why goth is such a nightlife culture in some ways? Because maybe that whole industry you were talking about like covers and like shows and stuff is like easier to help keep the scene alive.
I don't think it's just so unique to goth, but almost any of the very music focused subcultures, I'd say that's pretty universally true around, because venues at night is where music gets played. It's not common to go see a music act at 2 p.m. in the park.
True. Yeah, that would be crazy.
Although, I mean, to your point though, Trey, there have been a friend of mine in Australia who's a DJ and promoter, he said he was thinking about doing a early afternoon club thing because there's a lot of interest in it, both from to like people who maybe have kids or people who are just too young.
Yeah, it's just all the venues tend to not be open at that time. That's probably why Sarah keeps having so much trouble with Saturday morning events.
Yeah,
because they're early. They're places. 5 to 8.
Yeah.
Which is not when most of the music venues are even open.
Right, because nobody wants to drink at 3 in the afternoon, I guess.
But she always does have, like a good turnout for Saturday morning regardless, So I think there is a demand for it. It's just more of trying to find like these venues that are willing to host for an underage crowd or like a mixed crowd, right?
Yeah.
Like a mixed age crowd and just early as well.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't the first few Saturday morning events were pretty sparse. I mean, they were all pretty good, but they've gotten a lot bigger over the last year, I'd say.
Nice. I wonder if maybe it's because of that shift we talked about earlier about how there's a lot of younger people coming into the scene now.
Well, let me ask you.
Though a lot of the people who show up tend to be, at least a lot of people that I notice, tend to be parents bringing their kids, which is adorable, and I love it.
So cute. Start them young.
Yep.
let me to that point. I wanted to ask about the internet, the impact of social media, because we have this now. We have this like always online connection. So I was curious if you feel. I know we just talked about the scene ballooning now and having a lot of interest, but do you think there is an impact on people maybe being less interested to go out to physical events and stay home where it's comfortable because of the access to entertainment we have, or maybe the way people feel about the internet is pushing them the opposite direction, and they're like, I want to get the fuck away from being at home on my devices all the time.
Really
You know
good
what? I
call.
don't think so. I think that while the internet is like, blowing it up a bit, like TikTok specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's still this, how do I explain it? Like there's longing for actual human connection
Yeah.
and actual physical spaces, right?
Yeah.
Because, you could be on the internet, right? But it can also be so lonely just being on there because you can see like, oh, there's people who are going out to these events, they're meeting people. I want that, So I think that's what's I think in the age of the internet, I think it's important for us to have these spaces so people can form connections.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me worries because I feel like online golf spaces, which I usually stay away from, I feel like they could kind of be anal. And I worry that that might turn people away. But at the same time, I do think a lot of people find out about these things through the internet. I know I did, at least. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a mixed bag. I feel like with a lot of, it's always like that though. It's always a mixed bag.
Right. Well, yeah, because when I was in high school, it was just sort of you had to know somebody, or you would just hang out at the mall and hope you ran into somebody that looked cool, and then you'd go ask them like, "Hey, do you guys go anywhere on Saturday?"
I'm just gonna say like when Nat said it's like a mixed thing because yeah, like I said, it's like a big thing, but at the same time, it can attract the wrong people, who don't necessarily care about the culture itself or the music, but have just over sexualize like the women in the scene, and they say, oh my god, I want that kind of woman, and they just come in thinking that they can, just think that all what they see on the internet is how actual goth women are in like physical spaces.
Right. There's the preconception that tattoos equals consent.
Correct.
Mm.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that in a second.
Uh-huh.
I think, yeah, I guess it's just interesting what you were saying about the sort of the feeling of the internet being lonely, because I remember in the early 2000s there was the internet was sort of this esoteric, obtuse thing that I sort of came into it at the end of the net goth popularity and at the start of like Vampire Freaks. And social media was like a completely different beast entirely. And now to me, social media feels like this capitalist dystopia with the endless scroll and the government tracking and all of this stuff, where when I was younger, it felt like this exciting frontier. And I think the architecture of the internet is just different. And so these online spaces do give us, I think, this sort of artificial community where the sort of perceived good parts without the inconvenience of real community, like this veneer of human connection. And I think at the end of the day, you were talking about the individualism culture in America. I think social media does more to take power away from or like divide people than what you discover when you start to integrate into a community, which is the creativity, the diversity, the glue, the connecting to people over weird little subjects that you didn't have anyone else to talk to about, instead of this sort of like shallow consumption based relationship with goth that I think is more common on the internet, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Everything's
that's actually,
consumption on the internet.
yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like, yeah, 'cause I feel like, the internet used to have like things like forums, like people would just be like talking about music you like or like
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But now it's like you upload a TikTok of you dancing, and it's such a weird shift. It's like they're like complete opposites of themselves in a lot of way. Because
Yeah.
one's like the focus is you, the other one is like what you're talking about, and that definitely probably affects people subconsciously, whether they realize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember YouTube when I started making YouTube videos about 13 years ago or so. It had this feature that it was a reply feature. So we had this really
Mm-hmm.
cool YouTube goth community where somebody would make a video talking about, let's say, goth fashion. And then you could make a video and post it as a reply that would show up under their video, and the two videos would be linked together. So they would see your video on their page and you would see their video on your page. And it created this little environment where people were having a conversation with each other across different states and countries, back and forth, and everybody could follow this chain of like, okay, this video, then this video, then this video. And it felt like a conversation. Whereas now, yeah, like on TikTok, it's a lot more disconnected and disjointed than it could be, certainly than it is in real life.
For sure. I think on TikTok you can respond to comments with videos, but I don't think it's as streamlined as what you described. I don't fully know, to be honest. I'm not on TikTok because I'm scared of TikTok. But from my
Yeah.
understanding,
Well,
I don't know,
just the
maybe.
the structure of TikTok doesn't, at least from a person who uses TikTok. Now, I'm also not a TikTok user, but I know many who are. The way you consume TikTok media, it's hard to follow a thread
Yeah.
unless the thread is served to you by the algorithm, because you're not
Yeah.
going to a video and then going to, oh, let's look at stuff related to this video, or let's see what this video producer has liked. It's whatever the algorithm thinks you would like to watch next based on what you've watched in the past and what other people like you have watched. And so it's just takes you on this, internet experience on rails where you just lean back and let the scroll
Mhm.
roll over you
Mhm.
rather than trying to follow a conversation or a thread. It's, in fact, in my experience, it's hard unless you bookmark and save certain videos or certain TikToks to even find something again. Like, oh yeah, I remember that saw that one TikTok that was really amazing. Let me find it. And if you didn't like
Yeah.
save it, it's pretty hard.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
probably attributes so much more to the isolation. I know
Yeah.
Chelsea has TikTok, so she probably knows more about it.
So there's like this thing on your like profile. It's called watch history. So whatever you watch, you can go
Mm-hmm.
back and watch. It'll be there. But it wasn't like that like a year ago. It was much harder to find the videos you would see. But I guess there was a demand for it, so I guess they added that feature.
Okay, well that helps a little bit.
Yeah. But like you said, it is hard. Like if you're reading through comments and you want to respond to a comment, it's very hard to keep up with those, common threads because there's always something that's like messing up.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get back to this sort of, we were talking about the sexualization thing, because I wanted to ask
Yeah.
about okay, when I think about goth clubs and concerts, I think it's almost universally a gathering of minorities, of freaks, weirdos, outcasts. We often share spaces with queer clubs. And when you go out to an event, in my mind, it's meant to be this sort of world unto ourselves, sort of away from the oppression of work, the bullying of school, the bigotry of small-minded people. And we kind of cultivate this ambiance of the dark romantic world that we inhabit, right? So when talking about goth clubs as safe spaces, I think there are two broad categories of, like, I don't know, threat to that kind of serenity. There's the outsider and then there's the insider. So maybe we can talk about the outsider first. I wanted to ask, like, what are some of the problems you've run into with, I guess we could call them normie tourists, and what do you think some of the solutions might be to that?
Personally, I think one of them is just getting the most one is like the misconception of what goth music is, right? Because a lot of people tend to think that goth music is like, oh, Deftones or emo music or whatever, right? So sometimes they might come into a night and then they'll hear, I don't know, like something by Christian Beth, right? And they'll be like, well, what the fuck is this? Well, that's goth music. That's rock. That's exactly what you're gonna hear when you go into a goth night, right? I think that's like one of the biggest misconceptions that I've seen so far, especially on the internet, that it gets the genre just keeps getting crossed over, and it's not actually what it is,
Right. Yeah, I've definitely heard of. I haven't experienced this, but I've seen people talk about in different places where they have a local goth night, and for whatever reason, a few non-goths start showing up. Over time, they start requesting different kind of music, and they're playing like Charlie XCX or whatever. And so fewer goths are going or dancing, and then more and more normal people go, and it kind of devolves over time and turns into something completely different. So I think that can definitely be an issue.
That's happened to us right now. Remember when we would go to Enjoy?
Oh my god, yeah. And then Leo would like have to switch to more like I guess it is normie music, and we would be like
we came to listen to like goth music. But yeah, it's happened to us a couple times, and we're like, okay, well, we don't want to be here anymore. Yeah. I love all types of music, don't get me wrong, but if I'm going for like a specific genre, I'm there for that specific genre.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get grumpy because to use a metaphor or like a parallel, when I go during Halloween, when I go out to look at Halloween decorations, and there's these like soccer moms there or whoever, I'm walking around looking at this stuff, and they're giving me dirty looks, and I'm like, this is my fucking holiday. You look at me weird every other day of the year, and you have all these other holidays. I literally have Halloween shit tattooed on my arm, and I have to put up with your shit the whole rest of the year. Get out of the way of my pumpkin spice latte and my big poofy hair. This is for me, not for you. You're not entitled to take this away from me. You wearing khakis and whatever the fuck. So it's like I maybe expect it sort of if I go to like an 80s night or a new wave night. But if I'm going out to like see Iron Years or Grave Love or even like a Twin Tribes level band, I want to see a bunch of people in black and no gym shoes, right? I'm not there I'm there for our thing, not for this is our space. You get it. You get everything else the rest of the time,
This is kind of off topic. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll finish this real quick.
No, go ahead, Nat. Go ahead.
Do you guys feel like people are nicer to you when it's like around Halloween? I feel like people get nicer to me. They'll be like, "I love your costume," and I'm like, "Yay!"
I mean, it's nice, but it's kind of patronizing at the same time. It's hard to say because it really depends on how you choose to take it.
Because it's usually people, not a costume,
right? There's that, but it's also just that. So people are expecting people to be looking weird, so they don't look at you as strangely because you're sort of in a crowd of other people who are just dressing strangely because it's Halloween, so you can get away with dressing normal for you without people being worried about it or being affronted by it because it is just another person in a costume to them, because this is the one time of year where that's considered okay societally.
Yeah, it's just so weird because it's like you like it in this context, but outside of it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I've noticed it as much based on the season. I think what I notice a lot is an age difference. I think people that are older than me, regardless of what time of year it is, are sort of derisive or look down on me. Whereas I tend to find a lot of people that are in the sort of Gen Z age range will give me little comments about, oh, I love your aesthetic, or oh, hey, I love your nose ring, or whatever, that kind of thing. Which is really nice, actually, kind of healing in a way, because maybe 15 years or 20 years ago, people that were younger than me were would almost exclusively mock or make fun of me whenever I was out somewhere public, and just be vocal dickheads about it. So I don't know what's changed. Not even but that was before the barking was a thing.
Oh, before,
but like barking, pointing and laughing and like saying shit like that. I don't know what's changed, but I've definitely noticed that's been different. But yeah, I guess to finish that thought off. Well, no. Let me ask the second part of that. Is there something you think we can do to set expectations of like for example, do you think a dress code for an event is a good idea or not? Because people are mixed on that. Some clubs do them, some clubs don't. There's definitely good and bad to it.
I'm like in the middle of it too, because it's like I think it would be a good idea, right? But at the same time, people who don't go to goth nights or goth clubs, right, can do it as a form of mockery instead of actually trying to understand what the culture is. So I would in a perfect world, I would say yes, right? But considering how some people still view, because I don't know, like I said, like on TikTok, right, there was this trend going around of people dressing goth and going to Chili's for some fucking reason. I didn't understand what was funny about it at all, right? No, so to me, it was just, it can just be people who are actually genuinely interested,
right?
But there's also the people who are just going to make a mockery of it and might ruin the vibe for everyone there who's actually trying to enjoy the night.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the intention behind it. Because I remember a long time ago, there was a Facebook page called Goths in Trees, or there was one that was like Goths in Unusual Places. And it was mostly an insider thing, which was, it's just the sort of contradiction of looking really goth and then doing a normal person thing. But I think I actually, what I noticed it happening after, there was someone who was like is a goth girl who was a farmer, and she made some videos of her like driving a tractor and stuff that got like millions of views. And I think people started trying to copy that. And it does feel disingenuous. It does feel like mocking in a way. It doesn't feel like this is a thing that we're doing for ourselves. It's sort of like a performing for the outsiders,
I know what girl you're talking about. She seems so sweet. I feel so bad for her. I feel like that video got her attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do enjoy the sort of cognitive dissonance of, goths in weird spaces, or people dressed up all gothed out like they're going to a club, and then, going to, I don't know, something banal like a library or a museum. Or, I mean, that's kind of how Bats Day in the Park started as well, though a lot of it was also people who honestly loved Disney, or like, we'll go to Disney anyways. Maybe we'll just get other people to go to Disney and we can dress up and have a good time. And it's become huge. And I think there are definitely people who go just because they want to be the weird goth at the happiest place on earth. But there are also people who honestly love it, and love it even more when they can go with their community and have that experience.
Sure. I know a big one, like last year, was taking Christmas photos, but like in full like goth attire and makeup. That was really cool. I think for me personally, I'm also like very much on the fence about it. Because to be honest, if every goth event had a dress code, they would not be letting me in. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I get lazy sometimes.
Yeah, I that's one of my biggest problems with the dress code idea, is that it's a filter that doesn't really work, because it'll filter out people who shouldn't be filtered out because they're just not feeling it, but they still want to go out and vent and have a good time at a goth club, and they're into it, but they just don't feel like putting hours into doing hair and makeup and putting together that perfect ensemble. But it's also for a basic goth look, not hard for someone who to just come in and dress in some basic black and get in, who may actually be a problematic person. So it's not really, it makes it maybe a little bit harder for an outsider tourist to come in and be a problem in the scene, but it's not enough of a barrier to that, but it is a barrier to people who, especially given the scene that deals with people with a lot of neurodivergences, who may not have the spoons to goth it up, but do want to go out and get the balm that is going to their community, seeing friends, and being able to have the catharsis of music.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's just such a double-edged sword. I know for like some like fetish events, they'll have dress codes like that because it can like filter out people who aren't serious about it and like the safety of it and all that. Like, to your point, could that possibly be excluding people who maybe don't have money to dress a certain way, even though, it's supposed to be more like DIY, but that's become like a whole thing. Or like
Yeah.
who are neurodivergent or just tired from working.
Yeah.
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 Maybe we
And
should just do pop quizzes. I don't know.
there's also a lot of kink stuff that's not necessarily exhibitionist, and a lot of the dress codes for kink type nights cater to more towards exhibitionists because they're the ones that
Right.
can really look the sort of sexy BDSM thing. It's not so good for people who aren't into that, but maybe really like to be spanked, but don't like to show off all their skin.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day we can all collectively come up with an idea.
I mean, I think what usually works the best, unfortunately, is not easy to do because you can't just manufacture it, but it's community. It's having a group of people who are watching out for one another. And when the predator comes in, the community circles its wagons and the person doesn't have access to the target, or it's much less comfortable to target a single goth for whatever predation you want to do when if a bunch of people see that and they just sort of all gang up on this person, and not
Right.
necessarily in a physical violent way, but just that mass of people just sort of saying, no, that's not okay, go over there. um, it's more likely to be followed.
Well, I think I can't remember who said, it might have been the Open Graves podcast. I honestly can't remember now, but somebody said there's like a inclusive exclusivity at clubs where that sort of it's like a warning to outsiders, but a welcoming of anyone who wants to, in good faith, sort of join and be part of the subculture. So it's like I don't want to say policing, but boundary, like gatekeeping kind of thing.
No, I was just gonna bring up the fact that I think that's why I appreciate DIY venues so much, because it's more like, oh, ask a goth for the address, because then that's when you know that a person's actually serious about wanting to be a part of the community. When we did Release the Bats with Phantasmagoria, we've had people who are like, I don't know any goths, right? I've been wanting to get into the community, but I just moved here from a different city or whatever, right? So it was just more like, you can DM us, we will give you the address gladly, right? But if we see that there is something off regarding your profile or something, then that's when we kind of like flag it a bit, because we know you're not actually serious about wanting to join the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main flaws of community. I don't think it scales well. It's good at small and medium events, but when the events get like to Nocturna size, it kind of breaks down.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, you can't control everyone in like a big crowd like that. Like the visibility too kind of affects the kind of people that show up. I
Yeah.
know there was like a time where like there were definitely troves of men coming in trying to pick up girls who clearly were not actually interested in music.
Sorry, I am here. I had a internet issue. I'm scrambling around in the background trying to fix. Um, well, okay. So the other half of that question then was about protecting insiders from insiders, which is sort of where you were going, Trey. Because I think historically, in general, I think Goth does a decent job gatekeeping normies, sort of clocking someone who maybe is even playing dress up for the weekend. And there's kind of like a cultural shame around being a poser, which is both good and bad. But we generally seem to do well when it comes to calling out people who aren't involved with it. But I don't think we do well with when it's someone who's really involved in the scene, or they have a lot of specialized musical knowledge, or maybe they're a really good DJ or in a band. Sometimes they're really friendly with people. And have a lot of, the term is like cultural capital, the sort of respect from putting in time and energy into the scene, maybe knowing a lot of important people. So there's a social pressure, or it could even be something just be like being really pretty, or um, being really personable and friendly in public. And so I know a lot of people over the years, there have been people who were sort of fawned over, or they got away with a lot of stuff because of those reasons. So what are your thoughts on navigating those things? Is it like a zero tolerance policy? Is it a conversation thing? What do you think about that?
I feel like, well, at least this is from my perspective, but I feel like we're kind of trying to figure that out. It hasn't been that long since we've been putting on shows, and like now that we do, this is something that's come up, and it is like a really difficult situation to handle, because obviously, like, no matter what, you want to prioritize the victims, and it's like, well, what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah.
I think it's like a huge concern with things like that. And
Yeah.
like I do think like false allegations are like a very, very small
Yeah.
portion of these things, but it does happen sometimes. So that's
Oh
like
yeah.
another thing too. So it's a really hard thing to navigate, and I
Yeah.
think we're trying to figure that out.
There was like an incident a couple of weeks ago regarding a band, right? And that in order for us to deal with that, we kind of just had to do like actual investigation for it, right?
Yeah.
In order to like determine like, hey, this doesn't necessarily sound right. Not saying that it's not believable, right? Because anything can happen, right? But in order for us to actually determine if what happened, we had to do an investigation, and we did. Ultimately, it turned out to be false, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when it comes to people within the scene and who have just been in the scene for years, or who are just starting out, or who are in bands that are in popular bands, right? You kind of just have to be like, you have to do the work and you have to do the investigation, because like Nat said, like false allegations are a very minor thing, but it does happen sometimes. So in order for us to like protect the scene, I think like an investigation, or like has like something like that has to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a protocol.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
we could figure that out one day, but considering how like every case is gonna have like its own individual moving parts, maybe like a super strict protocol won't always be the best, but at least like something to go off of. So I don't know, maybe that's like something other organizers should think about, like having an idea of what to do if things like this arise, because trust me, they will.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Or
I mean,
just
I've
have
seen.
organizers.
Good.
No, sorry. I just meant like have organizers meet up and like try to make a protocol for this, because like I said, it's like a hard thing to maneuver,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good idea for, to have especially for a local scene like this, the local organizers all getting together to kind of discuss this, because one of the problems sometimes with insiders, um, who are predators, or maybe not predators, maybe not going that far, but who are
There are,
causing
though.
problems. There are, yes, but who are causing problems is when there are multiple different event organizers in multiple different events. They'll just event hop. I mean, if they're really bad,
Right.
they'll probably eventually get banned from all of them. But someone is bad, they get banned from Nocturno, they just go off to one of the other nights and continue doing the same thing.
Right.
And it's not solving the problem. But if all the organizers get together, first off, it's easier for everyone to share their experiences. Oh, this has worked. This hasn't worked. This blew up in my face when I tried it. This seems to have helped my community get better. So sharing those ideas between different promoters is a really good thing, because people, especially for those like you who are just haven't been doing it for a long time. If you talk to someone who's been doing it for 20, 30 years, there's a lot that can be learned from that. But at the same time, it's important for those people who've been doing it for 20 or 30 years to get that fresh perspective of someone who's just coming in
Yeah.
and doesn't have assumptions from 20 or 30 years of
Yeah.
experience, where they're still thinking, well, yeah, things that we did 20 years ago were still valid in today's environment, when, the attendees have changed, generations have changed. So seeing that cross communication between, people who are new, people who are experienced, different generations, I think is really helpful. And if a scene as a whole can get on the same page with, okay, these are things that are total red flags, these are things that are absolute bans, these are things that are having a conversation, it also makes the danger to the predator bigger as well. If they want to come in, it's not as easy to venue hop, to event hop, if all of the event organizers are talking with one another, and all of a sudden you do something bad at one. If it's bad enough, you might not be able to hop because you're all of a sudden on everybody's shit lists.
Yeah, it happens with
Exactly.
bands. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it happens with bands as well. I'll be vague about it because I don't know what the legal slander laws are or whatever. But there's definitely been bands that are outed as like, oh, this dude is a racist, and then people are mad about it, and then they just hop to usually this one pretty well known goth industrial alternative record label that doesn't give a shit and uses AI like album art and all this stuff, and just start putting their albums out over there. So it is definitely helpful if there's a unified front and like a network of communication between people that are leading different aspects of the scene.
Right, because there's people who have been banned from all of Sarah's events, right? But they're not banned from other people's events, and it makes it hard to keep people safe, because you have them banned from one of the biggest events, one of the biggest goth events in Chicago, right? But then they're also not banned from the more smaller ones. So it just makes it difficult for people to actually go out and enjoy these nights if they know that someone who is probably an abuser or a predator is at those events,
Yes. I have known women and men who have either left the goth scene or just sort of stopped going out because they're like, I can't go to an event if my abuser might be there, right? Like, why? Of course that makes sense. So, yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that, a conversation among organizers, promoters, bands, DJs is very much needed. And I'm hoping that it can come soon, or when anyone has time, honestly, because, everyone's schedule is very sparse and everywhere. But I think it is something that is needed in order to keep the scene as safe as possible from, not just outsiders, but also insiders.
Yeah. I mean, that's to some degree one of the values of something like, internet spaces, the social media, well, not social media, but internet
pretty
spaces.
Easy to ban.
Like not the bands. No, it's a way for the organizers to be able to interact.
Oh, right.
Establish protocols without being concerned about organizing schedules, and because if you have to get together physically as all together, it's never going to happen because no one's ever going to get all
Right.
their schedules together. But if you have a single forum or a Discord server or some sort of online thing that one person can post a bunch of ideas and another person when they're off work can respond and interact, and that's another way of sharing that isn't so constrained by scheduling and timing and all that stuff.
Like a group chat.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of group chats in other subcultures. Like there's apparently a pretty large group chat for female comedians where they're all in there, and then they sort of share like, oh yeah, this, all the dudes that are shitty to avoid, and that kind of thing. Definitely useful.
Yeah. And I think the Discord helps a lot with that too, right? Because from what I've seen on the Discord, we have pretty much like I think every promoter and organizer in it, and like majority of bands are in it, majority of a lot of people are in it, right? So when a conversation is needed, I think that the Discord helps a lot with it.
Well, let me ask along those lines, Trey, you were talking about sort of the way that goth is changing, and we're talking about sexism and that sort of thing. I'm curious about this because I think I've seen the goth scene change a lot over the last few years, over the last 10 years. So, I mean, misogyny is one example of that. I think there was a time where there were these things, not to say they don't happen, but more prominent. This like women would be praised for physical appearance while still being constantly questioned about like their musical knowledge, or they'd get more attention presenting ultra femme, but not gender bending, whereas men would get a lot more attention for gender bending. So I kind of wanted to ask, what ways do you think the scene, the values of the scene, the environment of goth culture has kind of changed over the last few years in terms of social justice issues or that kind of thing?
That's just a good question. I haven't really thought about that, if I'm being quite honest. Yeah. I think it's changed a lot, if I'm being quite honest, compared to how it was like a couple of years ago, right? I think I've only been in the scene for maybe 5 years at that point, right? So compared to other people in the scene, I'm still relatively new, right? But from what I've seen from like the early 2000s till now, I think more people have become aware of misogyny and sexism within the scene, and they have been trying to combat that. But it's also still a problem. Like no matter how much we try to combat it, it's always going to be there. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can just like get rid of right away. I think it's a conversation that is needed because racism, sexism, and just anything within that is always just going to be there. And as much as we don't want it to be, it's always going to be there. And it's something that we have to talk about openly without having people get mad at it,
Yeah.
Or say that, oh no, the scene is fine.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that. But just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean that other people haven't. There's been times where people have come to us and they told us about the times that they've experienced racism or sexism, and it's like, it's honestly just something that I think has gotten better over the past couple of years, but it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my sort of perspective on it is I think over the last 10 years, there's been a shift happening. I think it sort of started with the popularity, the explosion of darkwave, because before then the scene was pretty small in terms of not as much maybe in terms of like the dark ages of the early 2000s when it was all industrial and there were no goth bands. But like, I think there's been this shift largely driven by Gen Z, especially over the last 3 or 5 years, and even like the last year now, where I think Gen Z are really sort of blossoming and really taking over the scene in a really wonderful way. That I think has shifted the tone of the goth scene, both in sort of the politics and the inclusivity of it. Like I remember maybe 8-7 years ago, there was a lot of debate. Again, these things are cyclical. I can say that having been goth for like 20 years now or whatever. But there was a big debate around elitism and gatekeeping. And a lot of that I think was the younger Gen Z sort of trying to get into the goth scene and saying like, why do you have all these rules? And then the older people being like, we have these rules for a reason. And I think now I see more of like a happy medium where Gen Z have sort of realized the benefit of some gatekeeping, and the grumpier older goths have sort of backed down a bit now that they can see the dedication and the support that younger people are bringing into the scene. And I think in that process, in general, goth has shifted further to the left politically as well, which I think is also partly why you see these terminally online conservative goths getting so pissy. But
yeah, there's a backlash effect to that fact that you're seeing, but I think it's less indicative of a problem within the scene so much as the people who want to be loud are just being really loud, and so they seem to be a bigger problem than they actually are.
Right. Yeah, because what's that band goth against cancel culture? Holy shit, I hate them so much.
Yeah.
Facebook group.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you know the thing about them is, I guess I don't know how they started or whatever, right? But sometimes I'll peek in there and I'll see random ass people who aren't even goth just coming in because they see against cancel culture, you know? So at that point, that page isn't even. I've never met a goth conservative. I don't think I ever will, considering we live in Chicago.
I have. There are.
And I hope I never do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yes.
But that page just seems to be more people who are just pissed off MAGA people, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And they claim to be goth, but they're not, right? You don't listen to the music. I've seen some of the music recommendations they've set on there. None of them are goth, right? So I think one of these threads were, who is a goth artist that leans right? And none of them were actual goth artists because, you know.
You've never heard of the amazing goth band Kid Rock?
Like shitty metal music.
I think one of them was Kiss, right? Considering how deep and family are now, right?
Kiss is also not very right wing.
No, they are like, what's the main dude?
Gene Simmons.
Yeah, he's a big like Trump supporter. Yeah. As far as
he's a big the problem, a lot of Kiss, the thing that was weird with Trump supporters is the fact that they really glom down to the libertarians, which can go either way depending on the way things are.
Well, that's
because he was also one of the big voices against the PRC in the 80s. The whole Nancy Reagan against the pro free speech,
right,
against the censoring of loud music.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, because it impacts him directly. But as soon as it's like a minority group or something, then fuck those guys. Because it doesn't impact him. But yeah, to your point about the libertarian thing, I think that's why I wouldn't say goth is far left in general. But I know back in the early 2000s, it was a lot more common to be accepting of conservative or libertarian goths and some of the beliefs that came with that. So in that sense, I think we're seeing a shift as we're seeing more growth and participation in goth. That is sort of going away.
Right.
Just not quietly. Yeah. But I think especially, the last year going to events, outside of the political thing, I think the vibe has shifted as well. I think there's an electricity in the air. I think there's an excitement in the air that maybe hadn't been there. And I think in large part that's due to the younger people coming in and changing things. And older goths are so afraid of change and doing things different. But that is, I think, what brings that sort of intangible feeling of like, oh, this is really exciting. There's something special happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, in order for the scene to grow, we need, I think the older generation needs to accept change, right? Not all of the older generation things like this, obviously, because the ones that, like Phil and Sarah, they have just been so supportive, right? And that just means the world to us. They come to all our events, and we've seen like elder goths as well who have been around since like the 90s or early 2000s, and they're there, and it's absolutely just amazing to see the support that we have from them, because they want to see the scene grow. They want the younger generation to do these events, because at some point everyone's going to get phased out, right? There's always going to be new people coming in.
Yep.
Right? Me and Nat are going to get phased out in a couple of years, right? It happens. And
hope not a couple of years. That's you guys are leaving early.
Who knows?
I know.
I'm sorry, when I mean years, I mean like maybe 10 years or 15 or who knows, right?
Yeah.
But we want the scene to be taken care of, right? And I think that's what some people need to realize, that yes, we're younger. We weren't around in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s, right? But we love the scene as much as they do, and we want to see it grow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, back to the mentorship thing, that was what made the goth scene special to me when I was in high school was, oh, here's someone who is 40, 50, 60. They're in this thing that I think that I've just discovered that I think is like the coolest thing ever. And they're just excited that I'm there, and they want to empower me to learn about it and to participate and to be seen as an equal, which is something that you don't really have for a lot of your childhood. People don't see, when you're really young, people don't see you as a person.
Yeah.
And you sort of fight and struggle your whole adolescence and into young adulthood trying to assert yourself and get some sort of autonomy and be heard and taken seriously. And I think that is what I experienced when I got into the goth scene. So I think that has to be present for it to continue to thrive.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, let me ask another question. I'm a professional podcaster. Let's see. I guess I could ask the anxiety question, because I'm a little interested in that, just sort of because we're talking about how important it is to participate in the scene and everything that we get out of the scene. I know I'm a person who struggles with anxiety, and I've found myself missing out on events over the years because of my fight with that anxiety. And like I said, I think now is the best time in years that it's ever been to go out to a concert, to go out to a club, to go out to some sort of goth meetup. So what do you have any tips or like advice or encouragement that you would provide someone dealing with anxiety, or maybe worried about being judged or not being goth enough or that kind of thing, to sort of encourage people to get out, or how to even interact and connect with people when they do go out?
When I first started getting the scene, me and Nat would go to a lot of stuff together, right? And obviously our schedules have changed as we've gotten older. So when she couldn't go out like for the first time, and I wanted to go out to an event by myself, I think I just did it, right? Because I wanted to go see this band. I wanted to be a part of like this community. I think at some point you kind of just need to let that anxiety go, as hard as it is, because I have that anxiety when it comes to social interactions, even though some people might not believe me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think because like seeing someone who might have a band shirt that you might like or patches or something, you compliment them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you get the conversation going, and then you start feeling comfortable, and then you just start going to more and more events by yourself, and you'll eventually make friends, or you see someone that you know. I think it's something that you just naturally need to let happen. I think if you want to be a part of a community and you don't know anyone or you don't have any friends that you can go with, you just have to take that risk in order for you to be in that community that you want to be a part of.
Yeah, I know for me, like the anxiety thing is very real. I'm I'm a very anxious and paranoid person. So going out by myself is always terrifying to me.
Yeah.
But I've been pushing myself to do it more. Like I recently went like traveling on my own and like it was so terrifying. Like my body was literally shaking and numb.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it really depends on the person, but kind of similar to Chelsea, I'm kind of the type of person where it's like I need to just rip it off like a band-aid. Like I
Yeah.
just need to make myself do it because if I just stay and think and I'll just like never stop thinking.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think if you're someone who's like an overthinker, maybe a good method would just do it, like do it scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always find that like those kinds of things are always scariest leading up to it. Like once you're there,
Yes.
it's a lot less scary. So that's like a good thing to tell yourself that once you're there, you'll feel better. Maybe even tell yourself that like, oh, well, I'm here to enjoy the music, so there's less of that social pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. If anyone else has advice, I would love to hear it because I'm still figuring this out too.
Do it
But
scared is great advice because that's the same thing I say in terms of like clothing, where you're like maybe I just got off work, I don't have time to do everything, I don't want to go and just look like I'm just wearing jeans and a t-shirt. But I promise you, people will be more grateful that you're there in jeans and a t-shirt than not there, right?
Yeah.
And Trey, I think actually you had a really great general advice about where we just talked about with Back to the Grave and sort of the designated extrovert. I don't know if you want to talk about that experience and your strategy, but I think it's really good.
That's kind of always been my experience anytime I've been getting together because I don't have a lot of trouble personally just going to events. I've been going to events on my own probably more than I've gone to events with people. In fact, I rarely go to events with people. I usually expect to see people that I probably know, but that's not even always guaranteed. So I'm very much I go I go alone. If I see people I know, cool. If not, that's fine. So I'm used to that and I'm comfortable with that. But once I'm there, the idea of going up and introducing myself to people, that is a thing that just doesn't that's not a thing I do. I can't really bring myself to approach someone unless I've already met them and we've already chatted, but approach someone and say, "Hey, I like your clothing. Hey, I like your makeup. Hey, I like how you dance," whatever sort of conversation starter you do when you interact with someone. I am abysmal at that, so I don't generally do that. But what I've found is usually there are spaces in a given club where people are kind of just around and they're chatting, and people are sort of passing in and out of those spaces pretty readily. And I find just sort of installing yourself in one of those spaces, like at an edge, and just kind of being there and being interested in the conversation, but not necessarily jumping in or anything. And usually, if the space itself, which a lot of those spaces do, because these type of people collect those spaces, there's usually a designated extrovert in any one of those given little community spaces where people are socializing. And typically, especially if you've been going for a while, it's hard if you're like the first time at a space, but if you've been going for a while and people kind of see you around and then you're just sort of hanging around somewhere, you'll the designated extrovert will eventually see you and go, "Oh, hey, by the way, I've seen you before. I don't know you. I'm so and so. What's your name?" And that's kind of how every scene I've ever gotten into, that's kind of how I've always gotten integrated into it, is just kind of one, throwing myself out there. So if you never leave the house, it's never going to happen. So there's that side of it. So throwing yourself at the event, just being there, being present, don't necessarily have to interact, but just being there and then observing the dynamic, finding those spots where people just sort of socialize in that are sort of a public socialization because you don't want to get into this is a close knit group of friends that are just in a circle. When you sort of hover around that
Right.
doesn't work out well. But when it appears to be people who are just kind of, it's a general group of people. The easiest in the old days
Smoking.
was smokers.
Yeah.
Yep, smokers was the easiest way in the old days. That's harder now, but there are usually little public gathering spaces. In Nocturna, it's the stairwells. That's the easiest place there in Nocturna. But at Back to the Grave, it was just like the little coat area. People were just sort of hanging around towards the end of the night. And I knew one person in the group. It does help if you know one person. That makes it easier. But that wasn't the person who introduced me. So I was just sort of hanging around. And then, someone had seen me there and had seen me also at, a previous event and said, "Oh, by the way, I've seen you around. Hi, I'm Kim. Who are you?" And so that sort of brought me into that group. And then after the one person broke the ice, the whole group is like, "Oh, and I'm so and so, and I'm so and so. Good to meet you. I'm so and so." And so all of a sudden, I met like 12 people by just being present and being available. That's kind of how I put it.
That's great advice. I'd also say standing outside the venue because there's always like people outside the venue smoking and talking.
Yeah, that is one of the places. That is one of the places, especially like after the night is wrapping up, because there's usually a not insignificant amount of people who are like, "I'm not ready to go home. I want to find another place." And they're talking about, going to another venue or going to get some food or whatever, but they're out there talking and they're making plans. And so if you're just hovering around while they're making plans, you might just get included in those plans.
Yep. It's hard. That is harder for me. I used to do that all the time. It's harder now because I can't necessarily be out till like 4 a.m.
No.
But yeah, I think something I saw that I enjoyed the last time I went out that I forgot was an option, but was definitely something that I've seen happen years past. Was somebody, I don't know, they might have even worked there, but they were dressed certainly for the event. It was just somebody standing in a corner reading a book. And I was like, oh, I forgot I could do that. I could come out and just read a book. Because it's also kind of like the ultimate goth power move. It's very like mysterious and sort of like
you're inhabiting the space and being yourself.
Yeah.
It's true. Reading some, I don't know, Edgar Allan Poe.
Or fairy smut, whatever you're into. Yeah.
Yeah, like fandom. That thing.
Okay, well, I think there was one other thing for sure that I wanted to ask about. We've talked about this. Chicago goth scene is thriving, and I think we're all really lucky in that sense. But you both mentioned, I believe, that you've noticed the rise of the popularity of goth happening in like more mainstream culture. So I guess why do you think goth continues to be this sort of fascination of mainstream culture, and where do you see that happening?
Maybe at least from like the context of living in like the West is that goth is very much the opposite of our culture in a lot of ways. So I think for a lot of people that is kind of fascinating to them. Like it's a culture that really embraces things that are like macabre. It doesn't shy away from talking about things like suffering and pain or like death, which I think in the West it's like the opposite. You're like, people don't want you talking about those things. I think the attire and the music itself, I think it really is just it's just so different from anything else.
Yeah, I think it's more of like what is it? Curiosity killed the cat or something, right? Is that the fucking thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think because some people view goth as like mysterious, they just want to learn more about it. But unfortunately, stuff gets lost in translation. So what they think goth isn't actually goth, right? So it's, I guess this will run around of people wanting that are just so fascinated with goth. They don't actually know what it is. And it's this like little cycle of people just becoming more and more fascinated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, Nat, I've certainly had people, other like non-goths say to me, oh, I wish I could dress like that, or I wish I could still have my long hair or whatever. And it's like, well, you can. And so it's that sort of, it's like that freedom of social expectations, I guess, that's exciting. But then, yeah, like what you're saying, they sort of, that gets twisted into this, well, let's do that, but within something that's socially acceptable, right? We're not going to go all the way. And so it's this sort of like bastardized thing.
Right.
We're taking it too far where they're like, oh, it accepts these things. They allow these things. Well, I want to do this other thing. And it's, predatory, whatever thing. It's another transgression. It's just, oh, they're already transgressive in these ways. I want to be transgressive over here. So it's transgressive, and transgressive is what it's all about. And
that's a fundamental misunderstanding, because that's like the same dickheads who are like, oh, the conservative is the new punk rock. It's like you completely misunderstand what punk rock is in the first place, dude.
Yeah. They'll be like, well, I thought punk rock was going against the system. That's like conservatism.
Yeah. Okay, dude.
I mean, that's going back to transgression for the sake of transgression, right?
Yeah.
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 What about so the follow-up to that is these sort of like, because it's so popular, I think actually maybe another reason is this sort of like social unrest, but that's a whole other thing anyway. But like, because goth has become so recognizable and popular, we're seeing these pop-up events run by promoters that have nothing to do with goth. The first one that comes to mind is Crime Wave. So I wanted to get your thoughts on those, if there is any, like, if those are acceptable at all, what you think about those things.
Guys,
I have a lot. I hate them so much. They're corporate events that try to capitalize off our culture. I've spoken to a lot of DJs within the scene. The pay they offer is absolute shit, and I think a complete disrespect to the DJs for the amount of time that they're asking for, right? And on top of that, some of them were asked to bring their own setup as well, right? Which is ridiculous.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. And it's insane. And if you look at who is, doing crime waves or these one-off goth events that they have every now and then, right? If you go on the Instagram page, you don't see anyone that looks like us, It's more of what they would consider normies, right?
Yeah.
They have disco nights. They have these indie nights. I think that they just see what's popular and they're trying to capitalize off of that. And it's a huge disrespect to the organizers and the promoters and the DJs who put in their own time and money. And sometimes they won't even have that many people go to their night, right? I think it's a huge disrespect to them. And I absolutely hate them. And I refuse to post them. I know I talked to Nat. We refuse to post any of their flyers on our page because it's just simply disrespectful.
Yeah, dance local.
Yes, dance local. Support local.
Yeah, no, I agree. To your point earlier about like goth events not making any money, it's pretty gross to be like, oh, let's go make money off of this subculture that doesn't make any money.
Right.
I think that like the most I completely agree with what you said. The most charitable version I can have of that is similar to the debate around like, oh, Forever 21 has Joy Division shirts or whatever. Like, this whole thing is bullshit. Like, the version of that's the most positive way to look at it is to say, oh well, that makes it easier to get black lipstick, or it makes it like people might discover it. Because I did hear one story. A goth friend of mine said their cousin went to, I think it was Crime Wave, but one of those kinds of events, because they had kind of heard about goth. They tried to look up goth events. That was the first thing they found, that's a whole problem in itself, because if you're looking up goth events, you should find goth events, not fake goth events. But they went and they had a good time, and they were like, oh, I want to know more about goth. Thankfully, they are related to someone who's goth. But even still, you're kind of getting the wrong idea of what goth music is or what a goth event might look like anyway. So I think kind of all around, it's not great. I don't think there's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
right. Because I've heard, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd say that gateway aspect is probably the only potential silver lining, and it's a very dangerous gateway. It's a possibly effective one because it's well advertised, so easy to find. It's usually hyper well produced, so it's maybe not real, but it's got a nice polished veneer, so it doesn't have the sort of scariness to an outsider of a very DIY event with hand-drawn signs and a bunch of people in
But that's the point.
DIY outfits. It is the point, but you can't expect people to jump right into that with both feet easily if they're not coming from an existing DIY. If they're used to going to poppier events or things that are more well produced, a nice glitzy club, easing them into it, there's a value to that. But to everybody's points, it's giving a false impression. Now, there is times when they can take that shred that is remaining of goth in it and like, oh, I really like this, and then finding that elsewhere and digging into a more real evocation of that sense and finding love and joy within the community. But there's also, they could be grabbing onto the wrong aspect, the things that are false about it. So it's a real gamble, but it is potentially a mildly effective gateway. But that's the only potential good thing I can think about that sort of thing happening.
Right, and I think that's one of the reasons we started the page, so it can be easier for people to find, events and shows and stuff, because it was pretty hard for us when we were first trying to get into the community, and we just wanted to make it like the streamlined process easier, right? For people, like maybe they found a band like they like, maybe they saw maybe they just went to Nocturnal one time, but they didn't know what else or where else to look, right? So that's the main reason we started this page. It was started for the community, right? We never really wanted to put a voice on it. I think there still isn't a voice on it. We kind of just wanted it to be like, hey, this page is for you guys and for you guys only. It might be ran by me and Nat, right? And it might just have the name Chicago Gothic Scene, but we aren't the Chicago Gothic Scene. The Chicago Gothic Scene is all the DJs, all the producers, all the bands who put in the time and work. And we want to give them that spotlight,
Yeah. Well, and it can't be understated how important what you're doing is as well. Like, that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you both on, is because I've seen over the years so many people will run a website or like an... Trey, what was the Angel Fire? Was that what that old website hosting service? Like things like that.
That was one of them, yeah.
GeoCities, yeah. Like those will pop because discoverability has always been hard for goth stuff. And it's a thankless job to curate and put a lot of time into finding and creating a network of like, okay, I can figure out where these events are and share them for people and put them in this central repository. And I've seen those sites come and go like constantly because it's a lot of work to keep up with it. And it's kind of a thankless job. And, but it is so vital because I know when I was in high school, I would end up on all these dead, like reference lists or whatever, but like, oh, here's all the goth clubs in Chicago, here's all the goth clubs in New York.
Yep.
And
tons of those.
It would end up being like out of date. Like I remember one time
hasn't updated
like,
in 5 years.
Here's the
years.
address, here's the phone number, and I called it, and I had got all dressed up, and I was so excited to go out. Finally, I'm going to my first goth club night, and I called the phone number just to ask, like, hey, what time does the thing start? It's every Tuesday, right? And it's like a business park now. There wasn't even a club there anymore. And I was just
like someone trying to go to Neo now and showing up at a daycare.
Crestfallen, yeah. So like, it's so important to have those repositories, and it does take a lot of work, but it's like really meaningful, a really meaningful resource for the community.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you guys too. In a lot of ways, you guys are also documenting the scene and keeping it alive. I know, like way back, we did like a zine where we really kind of foolishly took on the task of trying to like talk about the history of the goth scene in Chicago, which was like, I don't like how that portion came out, but but I remember Sarah pointed us to this podcast actually as like a resource.
This podcast, that's amazing.
Yeah, so
I love that.
Yeah, you guys are doing really great stuff too.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's wrap up with one last conversation topic, and it's just sort of jumping off of this point of the importance of having a reference list and having community-run events. It's the question around, like, if someone maybe doesn't have much of a scene in their area, or they want to start, something like an Instagram page like yours, what kind of advice might you give to them in terms of like putting an event together, or making flyers for an event, or just getting connected with other goths to sort of start creating this network of people?
You know what? We actually have a friend, Amir, right? He actually started the Milwaukee Gothing page on Instagram.
Okay.
Because we have started the Chicago Gothic page, and he thought it was a great idea, right?
Yeah.
Because he also wanted for Milwaukee to have, like a very simple place to go so they can also find their own events. I think it's just simple things like that, just starting a random ass Instagram page because you want people to find local goth shows. I think it might be hard to find community within like smaller towns, right, or cities.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always going to be someone who wants to go to a show, who wants to go to an event. And I think some people just take the initiative of creating those events. And who knows, maybe just one person might show up, but maybe that one person is going to tell other people about it, and more people are going to want to show up. It's this snowball effect. And it really, all it takes is one person to start something for it to become a bigger thing.
I think it's like one of those things like you just gotta do it.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen if you don't get it done. I do think social media was really helpful for us in our experience, because I mean, just from like posting events, these people see you posting their events, and then they start to reach out to you, and then boom, there's a connection there. Like I know for us, like our first show, it was because like Dismal, which I think they're defunct, but they saw us posting their events, and so yeah, that's their new name. They saw us posting their events, and then they reached out to us about like doing a collaboration, and that's kind of how we had our end. So I do think if you were to do like exactly what we do, that's like a good start. Is from there you can get a connection from that. And then once you got like one thing out, people notice, and then other people reach out. You kind of gain more credibility. So then if you reach out to like venues and stuff, they're a lot more like willing to work with you. Definitely write everything down. Like take meeting notes when you're planning things. I'm trying to think of like other more advice I can give.
It's just a lot of hard work, and you just have to put the time in it. Like me and Nat, we are both very busy people outside of the goth scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within our jobs, but we love this scene, right? We want to see it flourish. So I will gladly stay up until 2 a.m. Writing emails to venues or whatever in order for us to keep having more events pop up, or having more show, or just being up late posting about I don't know, maybe a children's crusade show happening like in 2 weeks or something, right? It's a hard thing to do, but I think it's worth it at the end of the day, because you have that hope and that sense of community that comes from it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any advice, Trey?
Actually, it was kind of this discussion was making me think there's been a sort of old web revival going on that I've been running across lately. Mentioning GeoCities and Angel Fire earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There is a group of sites on now, NeoCities,
Okay.
which are sort of leaning back on that old aesthetic, the old, personal web pages, all the animated items and crazy colors and stuff. But the thing that they're doing a lot, which I think would benefit with what we're doing here with these community sites, especially mentioning the Chicago one, then the nearby Milwaukee group, the revival of links pages.
Okay.
And this sort of circular referencing where, say you go to a Chicago revival page, you could have, or a Chicago goth scene page, which could then have a links page, which would take you to, oh, here's the Indianapolis goth scene page, here's the Milwaukee goth scene page, here's the Madison goth scene page, whatever. That sort of thing, that sort of a network growing up out of these pages, I think would be really great, having this way for all of us to reference other scenes as we know them, as we meet people from other scenes, or other people want to grow these pages. I think if we all sort of link to one another, one, that helps drive traffic, which allows it to be an active community, and it takes an active community to stay up to date. Otherwise, it does just turn into, like Danny was saying, those sort of dead link pages that still exist because hosting was cheap, but the population has cratered, so nobody is updating it. So the ability to drive traffic to a greater scene rather than just a local city scene, I think would be a benefit for all of the pages. But I don't know how many exist beyond the Chicago and Milwaukee one personally.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's also for Indiana, right? The
Oh,
indie
yeah,
goth scene.
Yeah, I know they do have a decent scene there. But
Yeah, then the people who meet are wonderful people. We've met them, right? I know LA has one.
yeah.
But I think that's just a great idea. I think we might have to do that now. Just make like a master list of all the things that we know of so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably will try and find others, right? Because I'm sure they're out there.
We're gonna try to get every city.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I guess I have a couple things I could mention in terms of like starting a goth event or a goth night. I'm going to put links to a couple articles as well in the show notes if you are looking into doing that from people who run events. I've never run a club night. I was a DJ for a period of years. But so I would say from my experience, you should definitely, like you were both saying, build a coalition, have people in it with you. Like you said, you're both very busy. I've run this podcast for about 10 years, and I'm absolutely limited by the fact that running an event isn't just running an event. You have to wear so many different hats and do so many different specialized fields. Like with the podcast, I can't pay for an editor. I can't pay for a social media promoter. Like the audience doesn't grow because I don't have time to be talking about the show online and doing that sort of thing. I have to do all the research and things like that. It wouldn't exist if Trey wasn't here. I can say that for a fact. His friendship and support is what keeps me going, which by extension keeps the show going. So I think if you're trying to start a night, keep in mind that like zeal and excitement is really important to have, but you will definitely, or, you know, starting like an Instagram page, whatever, you will definitely burn yourself out if you're trying to do it by yourself. A similar piece of advice, try and find your niche. This podcast, I think, was successful in part because at the time when I launched it, there wasn't really a goth podcast like that. As we were kind of saying with the, excuse me, all this beer I've been drinking is coming back up. The growing scene right now is amazing, which the good part of that means you can get even more niche than you used to be able to. We have it's not like the 2000s where you every night was playing like future pop or industrial music, and when you were going to a goth night. So now we've got witch house nights, we have shoegaze, we have goth cumbia nights, we have like all kinds of. So like try and find something unique to your interests and look for that audience. And then as far as like the event itself is concerned, just from the perspective of somebody who goes to goth events, one of the most important things to me besides the music is the ambiance. When I go, I want to feel a vibe. I want the mise en scène. I want to feel like the door to the club is a portal to another world. I think that's why Neo was so successful in a lot of ways, because everybody talks about the alley you had to walk down to get to the door and the feel of like this underground bunker of a bar. And I think goth as a subculture kind of lives and dies on atmosphere. So if you're bringing in your Halloween decorations or whatever, burning incense, setting up candelabras, whatever it is, if you can create a kind of like haunting vibe or something specific to you, I think that goes a long way as well. So that's my unprofessional advice. But I think that about brings us to the end. Was there any subject or anything before I ask you guys to share your socials and stuff? Was there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
No.
Okay, perfect.
No, I
Perfect.
think I'm good. I think we like covered everything that we wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So then let's do that then. Can you both share all your socials, where you want to send people to look up the things you're putting out?
Right. So you can follow us at Chicago Gothic Scene if you're not already. We recently also joined Phantasmagoria, which is something that Moss, the lead singer of Lilac Lament, brought from South Carolina. So we and that is doing 21 and older DIY goth events, right? So this is strictly going to be DIY, hoping that they're all at DIY venues as well. And there's other pages, right? I believe that Dismal is now Underground, right? So they're also hosting more events. I know they're making an announcement soon, which I'm excited for. Haunted Save Files as well is another good source here in Chicago if you want to find also goth events or alternative events, right? We don't help with those, but I think that they are just very good resources to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those are some. Yeah, I think that's it so far. And join our Discord if you guys want to meet more people. I think we just reached like 400 members in it. So
it's crazy.
It's
amazing.
Yeah, if you want to go.
Yeah, it's great.
Insane. A lot of people have met friends in there, which I'm very thankful for. It was actually Alejandro from Grave Love who had this idea. And he brought it up to us, and that's how the Discord got started. And I've noticed that people use it to meet other people, right? They'll say, hey, I'm going to this event. This is how I look like. If you want to come up, say hi. And I think I just think that's wonderful. I think it makes it also easy. I think it goes back to where we talked about like the anxiety of meeting people, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a great resource. Yeah.
Yeah, I should probably do that because that's sort of a shortcut on my targeting the local extrovert too. Just post it right out there. This is what I look like, and I'm open to people approaching me. Means I don't have to approach them.
Yeah.
Right. And you can also, talk to people right before too. So you already know what they like or how they are. So I think it's been a wonderful resource in the scene so far.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you both so much. This was incredible. But hopefully we get to meet up at an event at some point and say hello in real life. This was amazing. I really appreciate you both sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, thank you for having us.
Shout out Alejandro. He's always putting us on.
Yeah, shout out to Alejandro. Shout out to Great Love.
Yeah.
Honestly, shout out to all the bands and the DJs. There's too many. Everyone knows who they are, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we also have a Chicago Gothic scene playlist, which lists at least one song from every goth or goth adjacent band within Chicago. It's linked on our Instagram profile if anyone wants to hear it, right? And also, this is not an advertisement or anything, but go to Benny's new bar in Pilsen New Rose.
Oh,
I absolutely love that bar.
Yeah, I haven't been there.
It's really cool.
Oh my god, you should go. It's become one of my favorite bars, and I'm happy because it's also in the South Side. If there's nothing in the South Side, yeah,
hell yeah.
I know Reggie's is pretty much as close as it used to get.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like Reggie suffers from also getting some normies sometimes.
I've never really liked Reggie's that much. A lot of good shows there, but I've never really enjoyed going to it.
Fair.
Parking there sucks. I hate it.
Yeah.
God, I hate parking. I love their food. I like some of the shows they have. Like, my God, the parking sucks.
Yeah.
Not too bad from the Red Line, but yeah, driving there is not fun.
All right. Well, I had a lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun as well. I think my takeaway from this episode is really to kind of cherish what we have when we have it, and seeing how vibrant the community and the live scene is right now, I hope is a encouragement to get out more often when you can, and to support your local scene, and to connect with some people maybe you haven't talked to before, or just get out and appreciate what's going on. I also think this sort of reaffirmed time and time again that the kids are okay. I think that's sort of been a theme of podcast. The pinned video on the YouTube channel is sort of about why the internet isn't killing goth. And a lot of the fear-mongering we see online about specifically aimed at newer goths is misplaced. Yeah, I think it's definitely important to talk about what goths' values are, where we came from, where we are going, because goth, of course, is always evolving, always changing. And I think that's clearer to me now, 23 years into the scene, than it ever has, having gone through a couple of these major sort of cycles of here's a lull, here's the complaint about what the scene has turned into, here's the complaint about where the scene is going as more people start to shift and things change. Here's the big swell in good music, good community, great clothing, good content, and the sort of embarrassment of riches, where all those complaints sort of fall away. And then here we go again with the lull, the leaning down, goth becoming more underground again, the complaints about there not being enough good music, or the club scene being dead, or elitism, or whatever. Take your pick from the grab bag. We all know the handful of topics everyone will complain about at any given time. And, it's the way of things. Nothing stays the same. And let's try and hold on to these moments and remember, and not have sort of myopic critiques of goth, but really aim those towards the places it matters, which is corporations trying to take advantage of a trend, or outsiders, or even goths sort of trying to change the ethos, the political aspects of what goth is, with its queer core, its sort of more leftist based ideology, its welcoming of minorities, its protection of alternative ways of being in the world that are counter to the overwhelmingly conservative systems of government and systems of society and culture. Like, let's protect those things instead of yelling about young women posting photos on Instagram. So I like that we had this sort of back-to-back episode of we just talked about dance in clubs, and now we've sort of talked about clubs and the live scene. And yeah, it's definitely invigorated me to make more of an effort to prioritize community and supporting the in-person scene wherever possible. You know, for me, it's never just been a situation where, I could go out, but I don't want to, right? There's always some broader issue. And I think maybe just a little point on anxiety here, as that's the most relatable. Of course, you know, I'm sure it's relatable to many of you as well, situations that I've been in, which are sort of working multiple jobs. And right now I'm going through a situation where my dad is dying of cancer, and that's a whole complicated thing, or being a caretaker for someone who's disabled. But anxiety, this was brought up during the episode, and a lot of us struggle with that. Of course, there are those designated extroverts, and we all see them. And sort of as was mentioned about the internet feeling lonely because we see people out and having fun, I think we sort of tend to latch on to this concept, this idea, when even we do go out of, oh, look, there's a group of friends over there. They look like they're having such a great time, and sort of have this confirmation bias of everybody's having a great time, and I'm the only one who's nervous or anxious or uncomfortable or scared. And that's simply not the case, because we just notice the people who seem to be on the surface doing the things that we would like to do, but are hampered by some sort of mental illness in doing them. So yes, the advice of do it scared is great, because there have been plenty of times where I tell myself, like, this is important to me and I'm going to go. And I've gone to a concert, been completely uncomfortable, had awkward interactions, and left from that thinking I didn't have a good time, but I know at least I did something positive. And doing that, forcing myself through that, makes it easier. It's sort of like exposure therapy, right? And sure enough, the next time it's a little bit easier to go, a little more fun. It's not a straight line. It's not easier and easier and easier necessarily all the time. Life is complex, right? I think for me, what helps a lot has been therapy. And I know that's like a cheesy podcaster thing to say, like, go to therapy, but really it doesn't have to be therapy necessarily. If you can drill down to what the underlying issues that are causing the anxiety are, usually it's not simply being nervous, right? It could be things that are a bit more mundane, like anxiety of driving to the city. Maybe you were in an accident before, or maybe you're just concerned about getting in an accident, or it's difficult to parallel park and that stresses you out a lot, right? So if it's something like that, you could look for solutions. Public transit, we talked about meeting up with friends, or I think especially in the age of the internet, there can be, one of the root causes can be just feeling social pressure. Will people like me? Will people think I'm not doing goth well enough? Will I say something embarrassing? Will I have an awkward interaction? Will my dancing look dumb? Will people see and perceive me the way that I want to be seen and perceived? Will I live up to an expectation that I have for myself, some sort of like perfectionism issue? And once you start drilling down into those reasons for the anxiety, then you can sort of analyze, where does that come from? You know, was this a issue that arose in my childhood that because of the way that I was treated by my parents or by my community, and I maybe just haven't connected the dots there and really understood where this comes from, and then obviously working to free yourself from that. And release yourself from that pressure you're putting yourself under, that no one else is putting you under. Often people are more concerned about themselves than they are about you, right? You have an awkward interaction and the other person leaves there going, man, I was awkward. They're thinking about themselves, right? What did they do? They're not thinking about you necessarily. Without going into excruciating detail about my own forays in therapy and my own deep dives into my identity and the ways that my life has shaped and triggered these hyper anxious states that can keep me from actually going out or attempting to go out to an event, because nobody wants to sit here and listen to me talk about that. Simply just as an illustration to encourage you to look at that and work on that. And there can be of course, all other sorts of reasons why you may not go out to events, to clubs. You know, I mentioned I'll put a couple links in the show notes for articles that sort of talk about how you can start your own scene if you don't have one, or throw a house party, start that sort of process. Have a meetup at a cemetery picnic kind of thing. Those are all options, but I think the essence of this is back again to community. Because if you're trying to work through this on your own, whether it's going to be impossible, you're never going to leave your house, whether it is therapy or whether it is a trusted friend or whether it is just sort of a conversation with other goths. I know for me, I can't speak for everyone, but one of my favorite things is when I'm at a event and somebody just brings up something deeply personal or deeply philosophical or deeply difficult and turns that into a conversation topic. It is fun to just chat about, hey, how are you? Did you listen to this new album? I love the way you are dressed. Where did you get that? Did you make that yourself? Are you going to the show next weekend? But I think especially in the goth scene, just throw out something uncomfortable, difficult, and profound. And I think people will latch onto that and want to engage with that. It takes some vulnerability. It takes some pushing through fear, but I think the outcome in the end is worth it. So next episode, I know last time I teased an episode on Sweden, and we didn't do that this time, obviously, but that should be our next episode. I'm really excited to talk about the details of the community and the ethos of the goth scene outside of my local borders. So I appreciate you spending this time with us. I hope you've enjoyed your stay. If you'd like to support what we're doing here, please head over to patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions. Join us on Discord through $1 a month membership. Really makes a big difference. So thank you all for listening. And until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.